And we're recording now.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot, Barbara. So, and hello to Caroline. So this was a sort of Q&A drop-in session to cover, wherever you and your colleagues are up to with the portfolio. So really, it's to be led by you, Caroline, as you're the person here, and you can tell us what questions you have. Are there any areas of uncertainty? What would you like us to talk about? I've got a few slides here which just covering the first two core areas of the CMALT portfolio. So that's the operational issues and the teaching, learning and assessment. So if you want me to just sort of scroll through them and talk in a general way about how to approach it, I can do that. It might be more helpful if you just want to let us know exactly what it is that is interesting you or concerning you.
Yeah, I'm not on the final part yet. I'm on the I've done the first part of the operational issues, and I'm kind of working through all the sort of different things that I've used. I'm just finding it hard for it not to end up being very repetitive and just purely descriptive. I did this thing, I did that thing. I'm not quite sure what kind of tone it should have, whether it should be a bit more evaluative at that stage, or if it is literally just a list of the things that I've used and how I've used them.
So, Barbara, if you want to scroll along, I think you're talking about the constraints and benefits of different technologies. Would that be it? Or the oh, there's an irrelevant slide. So we've got this one, yeah, or is it the next one? This one. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, you are in this one demonstrating the different technologies that you've used. So there's an element of a list in the descriptive part. How are you sort of approaching each section? So people often find it helpful to actually have two headings, one for description and then another one for reflection or evaluation. So in the first, you have a paragraph under the first heading just saying these are the technologies I'm going to talk about, this is how I use them, this is the context, and then in the evaluation you're going to be reflecting more on the constraints and benefits, what you've learned from what you've been doing with them, how this has affected your practice, what you'll do in the future, and so on. So I wonder if that's a helpful piece of advice.
Yeah, so I've at the moment got a bulleted list of the different technologies that I've used, and I'm kind of still I'm just going through them technology by technology, so doing the full thing, like a description and then a sort of evaluation after for each one.
I think that's a fine approach. So you can certainly have a bulleted list, that would be useful, but I would just select, say, 2 or 3 to really concentrate on in terms of the evaluation and reflection, and to go into those a bit more deeply. So there isn't a huge amount of space, so and as you say, you do want to avoid it just being a slightly repetitive description. So just to give yourself more room, really, and more opportunity to show how you're reflective and how your practice evolves, I would select 2 or 3 which you think are good examples to show to show those aspects.
2 or 3 rather than any more than that, and do those 2 or 3 in more depth.
Yeah, I mean, so you can have a bulleted list which would obviously show your range and so on, but then
pick a few.
On 2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, that would make a bit more sense.
Tom or Barbara, do you have any sort of insights to share on that one?
I think that bulleted list is quite useful, Caroline. What we did, I don't know if you've managed to look at our start of term newsletter yet, but the one of the things that we did,
pieces of it.
the Bellaby's APs, we had an opportunity when we had a meeting to help each other with the portfolios. So we we got a great big bit of paper with all the sections of the portfolio, and colleagues who weren't currently doing their CMALT portfolios sort of went round in a sort of roundabout carousel type activity. And the first activity was the CMALT candidates gave them their bullet list of all the technologies they use and how they use them. So they had a good chat about those. Then the non-CMALTers moved around and looked at that list, which they wrote together, and then asked, well, where are you thinking of using this technology in your practice? Which part of your portfolio would that best suit? So they kind of made a rough plan. And then the third round of the carousel, the colleagues looked at where they put the technologies and asked them in depth about how they would evaluate it, reflect it, make it better, how they shared it, things like that. So they really, by the end of it, had a massive bit of paper with post-its all over it. So the bullets were on post-its. And they'd really discussed why they were in that particular area of the portfolio and what sort of things the CMALT candidates would be reflecting on, and how they could improve their use and how they shared it. So they all really enjoyed that activity. And if you've got a bullet list of all the technologies you're using, it would be great to sit with a like-minded colleague and do something similar. I could do it with you, or Tom, or another person who doesn't know about CMALT. But that was a really useful.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I think just to narrow it down and find ones to focus on. Because I think I've got too big a list right now, and it's quite easy to get lost in it. So a bit of input on which ones are best would be quite good.
Yeah, I'd love to be your critical partner because I know how many technologies you use, and that would just like make me so excited to hear you talking about them. And but you know, it's really useful to have that conversation, a real conversation with a real person. Helps you suddenly see, well, actually, that gives a lot of evidence towards this area of my portfolio, so I'm going to put it there. Or it does really help. So from your list, what two or three might you put here in the spec?
If you give me a sec, I've actually got it on my other laptop. So
okay.
sorry,
You can share it if you want, or you can just talk to us. It's up to you.
I think Tom's just a way to grab it, but yeah, I'm on my Sheffield one. So if you just give me a second.
Yeah.
I think that's excellent advice. You know, a list isn't necessarily completely out of place in the portfolio itself, but you could also, you know, have it as an appendix and something to which you refer. We're talking about the next section, which is about technical knowledge. You know, you might want to refer again to the list and so on. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, I think it's good to make that list. It's a very good starting place.
Sorry, just logging in.
We can barely get one laptop for the team, and you've got two. I love it.
Yeah, we've got our big bulky University of Sheffield ones that we can't install any software on at all without the university say so. And then we've got our little ones. So I've got my portfolio on the little one because it's a bit more portable, so I can take it home.
Have you chosen a platform out of interest?
Yeah, I've been using Bulb, but just for ease of using it when I don't have internet and stuff, I'm kind of working in draft form just on a word processor at the moment. So I'd used for the operational issues one, I'd used Quizlet and talked about that in quite a lot of detail. But then I think I've kind of So I've talked about the use of it and implementation,
Mm.
and then I think I've kind of maybe got a bit confused. So I should have more than one piece of software in the constraints and benefits section. Is that right? Because I'd kind of started putting together a list for the next section, which was technical knowledge and ability in the use of learning technology.
Yeah, no, that's,
Yeah.
I think because we're talking about the constraints and benefits of different technologies, that does imply a bit of reflection and comparison, between different ones. But, it might be, I guess, different ones you've thought about in relation to the same task.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in this second section, the technical knowledge and ability, we're focusing on a range, or we're trying to show that there is familiarity with a range of technologies. So there, yes, again, the list is going to come very much in useful. But again, I would counsel that for the reflection, do try and be focused on 2 or 3 examples where you can, sort of go to town on the reflection and show how you've thought about things more in depth.
Yeah. So I think I need to pick another 1 or 2 from the list that I've got to go into in more depth. I've kind of started on the descriptive parts of them, but I've kind of got a list including so I've got the virtual learning environment, wikis, Turnitin, interactive whiteboards, Kahoot, Poll Everywhere, Adobe Spark, Kaltura, and Adobe Captivate were the ones that I had for the technical knowledge and ability section. So from those, I've already looked at Quizlet in depth for the first section. So I guess I need to pick a couple from that list to go back and add more detail on.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got more than enough. So you mentioned that you were worried about how to kind of approach the reflective part. Do you have sort of specific questions about that?
I think for the reflective part, I've kind of looked at being sort of quite critical of what the technology can and can't do, rather than just kind of saying, this is great, it works brilliantly, and selling it, but actually thinking, okay, in this particular instance, it takes too much time to set up or whatever. I think I'm quite good at being critical about it. It's it's kind of more known for the second section, for the technical knowledge and ability. Should I be including any kind of criticisms of the technologies, or should I literally just be saying I have used this and I have used it in this way, and leaving all the more in-depth stuff for the first section? I think I'm just not sure how much detail needs to go into each of the sections.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good question, because of all the sections in the portfolio, this particular one does kind of invite you most to a purely descriptive answer. But I think, again, in talking about the range of technologies you use and the context in which you use them, you will be hopefully also reflecting on what the thought processes were when you were looking for the technology to fulfill a particular task. So why you chose those, and then how they worked. Did they measure up to what you thought they were going to deliver? Did you therefore have to make any changes? What was the impact on your learners when you used them? So you'll still be considering those reflective questions. So no, it's not. Yeah, throughout the portfolio, those reflective qualities do need to be evidenced. Although, as you say, this section does seem to be more kind of descriptive. structure.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of structure, I think that the examples that you've shown us that were successful, Tom, are often quite repetitive in terms of structure, aren't they? What did I do? And then I can't remember the key questions. What did I do? How did I do it? What could I do better? How did I share it? Sort of thing.
Yeah, no, precisely. So I've just put a few in the chat now. So yeah, you really you can approach it in that very kind of, as you say, Barbara, rigorously and even repetitively structured way, because thinking about those questions are always going to prompt you to the sort of evaluation which the assessors are looking for.
Yeah. I'd just like to welcome
I think those
Johnny to the
questions are
call.
good.
Yeah, those questions are great, aren't they?
It's quite a nice starting point, actually, just to have a little bit of a scaffold almost to build it on. So thanks for that.
Yeah, hi, Johnny. Hopefully you can hear.
I think it's a similar question from me in the same vein. Sorry, Tom. I'm wondering what percentage of submissions you have actually do divide things into here's the description, here's the evidence, here's the reflection, and what percentage just put it into like seamless prose and what you prefer as an assessor?
The second part of the question is easier to answer. So I think all assessors give and repeat the advice to divide it into sections. I don't know what percentage exactly of people do that.
That's good to hear.
It's a common approach and one that is comes with the seal of CMALT assessors' approval.
Lovely. I guess while we're here, the other question I had was, it's not to do with this section, but it's to do with when you get your initial feedback, you don't pass. Is it okay just to develop the sections where it is inadequate, or would you expect the sections that have been adequate to then be added to so that they can potentially be strong, or is it down to the time constraints of the individual?
So it's down to you. So what the minimum requirement is to revise the sections which have been marked inadequate. So if it's already been marked adequate, you don't need to touch it. But the assessors will have given feedback to show how they think it could be improved to strong. But for the portfolio to pass, every section needs to be adequate or above. So it's only the inadequate sections you need to worry about.
Thank you.
So I was just going to say hi to Johnny and say that we've been talking a bit about how you might approach the first two sections in core area 1. So if you have any questions about these areas or about the process in general, let me know and we can try and address those.
Hi, Johnny. Okay, I don't think your mic's on, but we've been talking about Caroline's first and second parts of the portfolio, and Tom Palmer at ALT has given us a really useful list of questions. So I'm just summarising the call so far, and we'll share those with everybody. And also said it's really beneficial, and assessors prefer it if you describe the technology that you're talking about, give the evidence, and then separate out your reflection answering those questions. So we'll circulate those questions. Yeah, that's great. That's useful. And I also advise Caroline to work with a critical friend and get lots of post-its and a big bit of paper to do a plan. So I'm hoping we might be able to do that, or find someone who could do it online with her, who's also doing CMALT. Post-its are wonderful.
So, oh, Caroline, I think, are you about to say something? I'll mute myself.
No, sorry. I just clicked the button by mistake. Sorry.
Okay, I was just going to ask Tom how you're getting on with your revisions.
Excellent question. I was about to talk about that actually. It was around this time last year that I did the initial input for CMALT. And the approach I found worked really well for me is I was able to find 2 days where I could just get my head down and pretty much just focus on CMALT. I know that can't always be possible. Sometimes at the weekends you've got other things to do and whatnot, and obviously during the week you've got teaching and other priorities to be looking at. But what I plan to do this time, because that won't be a possibility for me, I think I'll be able to snatch about an hour every evening. So Caroline showed me a really useful app called Habitica. I'm actually using it with my daughter as well. She's obsessed with it already, and she's only had it for about 4 days. But essentially what it does, it allows you to gamify your life. So you get an avatar and you get health points and experience. And if you meet your daily tasks, then you get health points. But if you miss it, then your health goes down and so does your experience. And you can buy things and skins inside the game. So what I plan to do is use Habitica, set it daily, and for 1 hour every evening, I'll focus on CMALT. And hopefully I'll be able to get it done in space of maybe a week. But we'll see how it goes and watch the space for feedback. But I do plan to submit in February, and I hope that will work. And I'm sure that an app like Habitica will really help me stay on track.
That does sound really cool. And hopefully we'll catch up soon and have some digital rewards, like a digital badge for CMALT.
Forest as well, yeah. I've not tried that one yet, but I will do. Oh, excellent. That's teamwork.
What does Forest do, Caroline?
Yeah, so Forest is one that I've started sharing with students as well. You get a little tree that you have to grow. So you set how long you want to be working for, say, 30 minutes. And if you try and look at Facebook or check your messages or emails or something, or basically get distracted by your phone, the tree dies. So you have to start again. So it's kind of like a reward for staying focused on the task that you're trying to do and stopping you from drifting away. So yeah, you plant a tree, it grows in whatever time you've set, and the tree gets killed if you leave the app. And every day you return, you can see how many trees you've grown. It kind of gives you an idea of how much you've managed to stay focused on something. And the really nice thing about it is they actually plant real trees. If you use like virtual coins in the app, they actually donate and plant real trees. So it's quite nice. The students seem to like it, and it's good just to make you realise how much you do drift off and start doing other things when you're trying to focus on something.
It looks lovely. I'm just having a quick look now.
That is such a great idea, because it's very positive imagery growing a tree, isn't it? And then connected to real trees. Wow, how lovely.
I'm just on the website now. They've planted almost 250,000 trees so far.
That's amazing. There's also this search engine you can use that plants trees with instead of generating advertising revenue. Ecosia or something, I think it's called.
Yeah, there's another one that somebody showed me yesterday, actually. I think it's My Study Plan. Just checking. Something like that. My Study Life, that was it. It's a kind of study planner platform for students and staff. I've not properly tried it out yet, but someone recommended it recently, just as a way of sort of putting in everything that you need to do and trying to keep track of it, kind of similar to a calendar, I guess, but a bit more interactive. So yeah, I think I'm spending more time trying to figure out ways to be productive than actually being productive.
Sorry, didn't share that.
Yeah, I find it's quite hard to find time that I can set aside for doing this. Like I'm way behind on where I'd planned to be with this. And it's just trying to find, a couple of hours to sit down and properly look at it rather than just, a half hour, an hour here and there. I think I just need to get a bit better at planning my time and maybe not just falling asleep on the couch when I get in, but actually setting aside some time to sit down and work on it. Um, when is the actual date deadline for this? I think I checked a few emails. I know it was February, but I haven't been able to find a specific date.
Yeah, it's the 1st of February, Caroline. So if you can get it in by the 1st of February, or if you need a couple more days, let me know. Then it will be assessed over the next couple of months. Otherwise, the next deadline is the 1st of June, I think.
Okay, so if it doesn't get in February, it's not like that's it, it's over. It's
no, it just means
preferable to have it in February, but if it all goes to pot, there's June as well. Yeah.
I have another question, if possible. I'm wondering, Tom, what percentage again of CMALTers submit knowing full well that they've not passed because they want to gain your feedback and use that to improve further? Is that quite common?
Yeah, again, I think this is just anecdotal, but that's certainly an approach that some people take, and I think it's perfectly legitimate because, as we say, it's all part of the process. So it really you don't have to worry about it being the perfect finished product when you hand it in, because you will get constructive feedback, which points out where you need to, fill gaps or improve it. So, obviously, don't kind of hand in a blank sheet of paper hoping the assessors will write it for you. But yeah, I think it is a legitimate approach, and one that some people take, whether consciously or not.
And just say I'm looking at the comments and thinking about what I'm going to write, and they are really helpful. They show me where I need to be paying more attention, or where I need to put more evidence, or perhaps add a little bit more reflection. It's quite specific as well, so it did help me, that approach. I'm also wondering, just to alleviate any concerns that CMALTers have, is what percentage do actually pass straight away, roughly, just so they know that you're not alone if you don't pass straight away, and they did intend to actually put their all in the first attempt.
Yeah, again, that's a good question, and some people may be surprised to know this, but it's probably 50-50. So it really is very common, just as common to be referred as to pass first time.
That's good to know. I'll feed that back.
And yeah, I mean, sometimes this can, the fact that you're referred doesn't actually mean that another assessor might not have passed you, but it might just be that the assessor you have really feels like you've got makings of a very good portfolio, and they'd like you to see you improve it. So
yeah, that's nice. So Caroline, you've got two options here. You could sort of accelerate your production and get it in for the 1st of Feb, which isn't far away. Or you could take time and submit it in June. But either way, if you like the idea of that planning session and you would like me to be your partner for that, please let me know and I'll make it happen. Also choose a colleague, locally or Tom or whoever. But I think it's really helpful to have a person to chat through your thoughts with.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that would be quite good. I'll maybe chat with Tom a little bit about that. I think I'm going to try and aim to get it in February, even if I know it's not absolutely perfect. But obviously not a blank sheet of paper. But I think I'd really like to, not put it off too long. I think if I wait till June, I think I'm not going to make as big an improvement as if I hand it in February and then get some feedback and can work on it. But yeah, I'm definitely going to still aim for February, but it's kind of reassuring to know that it's not the end of the world if I don't make it.
It's a process. It's not a summative assessment. It's a process, and we're really excited about seeing your portfolio because you're just amazing. So it'll be great when that gets shared amongst the team.
Thanks.
I think that sounds like a very sensible approach, and as always, it's a lot easier to think about something when you've got it in front of you, rather than something that's yet to exist. So definitely good to get it down as much as you can. So did people want to sort of move along and talk about the next core area, or are there any other general questions? Or yes, okay. Well, Barbara, you're controlling the slides, so I think if you move along. There we go. Yeah, so here, as as the slide says, this is all about your learners and how you approach teaching and learning, whether that's from the perspective of delivering it or supporting it, how you think about pedagogy, and how your practice and your thinking has evolved as a result of problems you've solved, tasks, projects you've undertaken in the past. So I think the first section is about understanding teaching, learning and assessment, or is it your target learners? I think if we move along, Barbara, all will be revealed. Teaching, learning and assessment processes, yeah.
Move on again.
So, well, I mean, should we pause there and see if Caroline, or I don't know if John is able to participate, but if you have any thoughts about what examples you might talk about here, what you might include, it'd be interesting to hear those.
Well, I guess here you'd talk about any curriculum development that you've done, as opposed to just the technologies individually, but how you've put it all together to create a full course. How do you avoid making that just a repeat of what you've put in the previous section? If you've already talked about how you've used things like Quizlet or Turnitin or whatever in quite a lot of detail, obviously you've used them to do these tasks. So I think I'm a little unsure about how to really pull it all together without just repeating. I mean, do you just say, as explained in the previous section, I used Turnitin, this is what I did with it for that particular course? And yeah, I think just in general, I'm not quite sure how this section would be structured.
So yeah, again, just to emphasise that the portfolio will bear an element of repetition, and people work in fairly well-defined roles. And obviously, you're going to be talking about the same pieces of work more than once, and you can cross-refer. Especially if you've already provided some evidence for something you've done. Just say, see the same piece of evidence. That's fine. But in the first section, you've come at this from the perspective of operational issues and what it was about the technologies themselves that made you think they were appropriate for a task, or what were the constraints and so on. And here where the perspective is very much teaching, learning and assessment. So this is all about what are the learning goals, what's the impact on the learners and so on. Is that a helpful distinction?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So very often in this section, people will be, so this isn't necessary, but they might refer to sort of pedagogical theories or learning styles and so on, and this is the kind of the way in which people approach this section and think about it. So so whereas in the first section the reasons why you might have chosen a particular technology were to do with its technical affordances and so on, in this one you're talking about your motivations, lessons learned and so on in terms of the learning, teaching and learning. Barbara, did you have anything to add to that?
I've got something to add, just to say my feedback for this section actually supports what you've just said about having some theoretical, some theories there underpinning what you're saying. So that's definitely something I need to go back and have a look at.
So you don't have to, I mean, you don't have to have academic references, but you do have to show that you have, thought about the kind of conceptual underpinnings of what you're doing, in terms of pedagogy.
I'm sure to do that.
I'm trying to think about, because learning styles is slightly out of favour now. I'm trying to think about which theories I would include there. That's helpful for you to say that that's a really important underpinning for this. I'm thinking about it.
So yeah, just to say again, this doesn't have to be the kind of a theory or discourse propped up by lots of academic references, but that you have thought. Yeah, I think you understand what I mean. Again, in this section, you may well want to have a look at some of the example portfolios to give yourself a bit of orientation. So I'll stick the link for that in the chat again.
That'd be great. Thanks. Does it have to be something that's completed and sort of tested, or can it be something that you're currently working on?
Yeah, no, it certainly can be. So, I guess if something had been completed, you'd be able to talk about the impact, perhaps with evidence, about feedback or outcomes. But if something is still going, you can still talk about, your thinking, the decisions taken, and why, what's gone well, what's gone badly, all of these, the impact, and therefore the impact of all of that on your own thinking and work. That's all, you can talk about that in relation to something that's still happening.
I'm thinking about your use of Quizlet as one of your pieces of evidence, Caroline, because actually there's quite a lot of research into memory and learning vocabulary in another language, which is what we're trying to support. And that actually you may be able to refer to that here and other ways of supporting language learning. Well, learning in a second language, learning content in a second language. Quite interesting.
Yeah, I think I might focus a bit on that, because it is something we've tried to put in all of our modules here. I mean, we really focus quite a lot on Quizlet and other ways of trying to get students to understand the vocabulary.
Make it active.
Yeah. I think that would be quite a good way to approach it.
Yeah, I'll look up some stuff in case it's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
But yeah, exactly, Barbara. So those are the sorts of things you'd have been thinking about in any example in this section, thinking about it how from the perspective of the learner.
Yeah. One of the study group what do I call this, statements of purpose is students first, which we often scoff at because we think, ha ha ha, do they really put students first, and so on. But I think we really do in our team. We really think about the student's experience and think about why are we making people use this technology? Oh yes, it's because students come first and they're learning. So I think I'm sure we can fulfill this one.
I mean, in many ways, I think this will be easier. I think in the first section, you're sort of perhaps artificially limiting yourself a bit, because I'm sure you are thinking about all of these teaching, learning, pedagogical ideas when you are looking at different, what technologies you use and their constraints and benefits and so on. So in the first section, it might be written really that you're, artificially focusing your discussion a bit more on the operational side, whereas in this one, you're opening out into that thinking, student-centered thinking, which is probably much more characteristic of the way you approach your work in general.
Yeah, it's embedded, really. Do you want me to
definitely think there's some things in my first section that should probably be moved into this part. So looking back on it, I think I've talked a bit too much about the teaching and learning in the first section, which might limit what I can then say in this part. So I think there's a bit of
I wouldn't. I mean, obviously you're the best judge of that, Caroline. But I wouldn't. Throughout the whole portfolio, I mean, one of the core principles is understanding the interplay between technology and learning. So we are always looking to see that that people understand that technology is used for an educational purpose. It's not an end in itself. So, I don't think that stuff is necessarily going to be misplaced in the first section. Obviously, you may think that some of it might work better here, but yeah, don't feel you, or don't take from what I've said that you do need to kind of strip it of any of that sort of thing. Sorry, trying not to give bad advice. I hope that makes sense.
No, that's fine. That makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Shall I move forward?
Yeah, do, Barbara.
Oh, here's an example.
Ah, great. There we go. So I think this is from our old friend Rachel, or Ian, possibly. So you can see there, this candidate has done a PGCE, so that itself is evidence of thinking about teaching and learning. And she's, or he, I think this is Rachel's, but anyway, they've gone on to talk about what they've taken from that and how they've applied it to the work they do with learning technology.
Yeah, that's good. So we'll share these slides after the call so people can look at this example.
Definitely, but just to reiterate, there are many examples in that list. So if you will, which the list, by the way, you can filter, I think, by specialist topic and sector or something. So you might be able to narrow down, ones which are actually more relevant. But you'll certainly find one which is broadly comparable to what you're trying to achieve as well.
I also updated a set of worksheets to go with each section for the Bellaby's meeting, Caroline, where it just focuses on that section, and there's some tick boxes say, yes, I've shown this, yes, I've provided evidence, and yes, I've done 2 examples or whatever. So it helps you work through and do a self check of each section. So I'll make sure I send you those, and we should perhaps check that they're on Study Smart so people can download them. I gave people hard copies of them at the time, but I think they're useful.
I've just gone through the smart the elite page. I've just closed it down. Can have a look later.
I think almost invariably, the people who are applying for CMALT have more than enough evidence, more than enough examples to discuss, and I think in most cases they've got the material, both the description and the reflection, in what they've written. But if they're referred, it's most often because it's not really quite clear, or they haven't made it clear enough to the reader how they're approaching the presentation of that material in that sort of structured, clear way. And so it's I think, as Barbara said, if you have that sort of checklist, and if you can take a kind of detached view of what you've written and think to yourself, have I covered these points? That's a useful exercise.
Shall I move on?
Yeah, sure. So I think the next section is the understanding of your target learners. There's another example that was from Ian, yeah, who also did a PGC primary education. So these two examples, they did have a sort of theoretical background to fall back on, but that's certainly not the case for everyone who gets CMALT. And here again, you see, as I said in the last section, I think this is obviously going to be your methodology, and so I think the trouble here will be really the narrowing and focusing on 2 or 3 examples rather than finding it difficult to think about what you're going to put in here. Oh, and just to say the third bubble along on the right there, that's not just bad formatting. I think that is deliberately emphasized. So we're, as I've said earlier on today, this is all about how your practice is evolving and developing as a result of the work you've undertaken and the reflection that you've subsequently done about how it went.
I think it's important to always be evolving and reflecting. I think that's the nature of being a facilitator of learning. If you're always learning yourself, that's natural. But to show it in a portfolio is quite hard. But it is the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. And people can feel exposed if they don't necessarily want to talk about things that went wrong and so on. But
yeah.
That's all part of improving and learning from your experience. So that's exactly what the assessors want to see. But Caroline, it sounds like you don't have a trouble with being critical and evaluative. So hopefully this won't be a problem for you.
Move on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, people just let me know any questions. Again, I think these are some examples. I should say.
Sorry.
Oh, cheers, Tom. Nice to talk to you.
Cheers. Sorry.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Tom.
I was about to announce my own imminent departure in 5 minutes or so. So
yes, we've used
right.
an hour. Yep. So shall I skip through the slides just in case there's another question that comes up?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, please do. If there's anything else that's occurred to you that you want to talk about.
I think these slides look really useful.
While we're being recorded, I'll just say treat these example statements with a pinch of salt. They are just examples, and they're probably a bit briefer than you would find in a real portfolio. But this feedback just gives you a bit of an insight into how the assessors might evaluate statements in this section.
Yeah, that's really useful. Are we getting the slides sent out afterwards as well as the recording?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Yes,
great.
you'll get the slides, and just to say, there's a whole list of these examples as an appendix in the CMALT guidelines. So the rather hefty document which you're using has got these in it.
As Caroline also has to go and teach, I'll just very quickly pop through wider context. I think this one causes a lot of issues for people, but we're getting better. You've got the shared portfolios on there, and yeah, that's the last one.
Well, this year we've got the GDPR to think about, so that's, you know, ready-made subject for everyone. So yeah, as I always say, just get in touch if there are any questions. And you know, if you do just want some feedback, say you've just written one section and you'd like a bit of a steer on how, you know, whether you're hitting the right tone and level, you can send that along to me, and I'll ask an assessor to have a look at it and just give you some informal feedback. So that is also always an option.
No, that's been really helpful today, actually. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'll share those links for planning. I'll share the slides, and I'll share the recording once it's processed. It usually takes a little while to process. Tom, thank you for your time. Caroline, thanks for joining. Johnny, thanks for being with us, and look forward to seeing you in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, is it? Or is it a month?
So I think we've got these scheduled every month. Although, you know, if there is a time that everyone can suddenly make, then just let me know, and we'll do that. Yeah, so I'll look forward to hearing about more progress in about a month. But Caroline, it sounds like you're well on the way, so I'm sure you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody. Really appreciate your time, and I'll be in touch, Caroline, with all those bits and pieces and invitations. Okay.
Yeah, that'd
bye,
be great.
folks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.